Some of the most fun I've ever had playing D&D was the first time that I made a D&D character with one of my friends, and we decided to give ourselves a unique relationship. We decided to be siblings, where I was the younger brother who always wanted his approval and attention, and he was the older brother who wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. And that dynamic created something that I never experienced before, where I could control some of his backstory and he could control some of mine, where I'd say, well, Mom always knew I was the favorite, and then that was canon. We had to both incorporate that into our stories. And then he would say, well, you always peed the bed growing up. So now I had to figure out what that meant for my character growing up. And it became this fun dynamic where we kind of would throw these jabs at each other. And it made it so much easier and engaging to role play than just being two characters who didn't have a shared history. So that's why when I made my character backstory cheat sheet, in it there is a history section, and in that is a section on how you know another PC, like how are they connected through your history. It's gonna make it so it's easier to roleplay, it's gonna make it so you understand the group dynamic a little bit better, and more importantly, it's gonna add more collective storytelling, which is the most fun. And this is not how the whole adventuring party knows each other, but how your character connects to one or two other characters. And so I thought it would be a good idea to give you guys the 6 generalized types of relationships that you can use to kind of come up with your own ideas. And this is going to be a simplification. It's not over-encompassing, and most likely the lines of this are pretty blurry. You're going to fall into maybe 1 or 2 categories, and it'll change over time. But again, this is just to help spark creativity, so when you're coming up with characters, you can be like, oh yeah, I could try this dynamic. I haven't tried that one before. So let's get into it. But first, imagine you're in a tavern. The lights are low and the room is warm. There's soft music playing and the jovial chatter of other patrons. But what's that smell? Ugh, it's Kyle's shoes and the immersion is broken. Thanks, Kyle. If only you could have the smell of a tavern right there at your table. With Wicked Warlock's wood-wick candles, you can. They have scents of all your favorite D&D locations. The tavern, the dwarven mine, the elvish city. If you're looking for that extra bit of immersion, this is a great way to do it. I personally love the scent of taverns so much, and I love the atmosphere it helps create. It's just like that little extra that I think players really appreciate. So if it's something you're interested in, go check out the link below. All right, back to the video. The first relationship type is the most common and overarching, and it is the old friends. And to be clear, it's not just people who would fall into like the friend category, but like siblings can be a part of this, old war buddies. I mean, anybody that you have a history with that you feel positively towards. And these are so easy to role play because you don't have any like serious conflicts and you are just yes-anding each other all the way to the end. The more intertwined I think these characters are, the more fun they can be. Because if one has an idea, you are gonna commit to it and follow through all the way to the end, regardless of how bad it is, right? You're not gonna let intelligence get in the way of a good friendship, are you? I mean, a good example of this is Merry and Pippin from The Lord of the Rings, right? They are both down for each other's antics, and when someone else says, we should do this, they're like, yeah, we should do this. I mean, what a great example. So keep that in mind when you're making it for yourself. So the second relationship type is the rivals or frenemies. And this is similar to the old friends, except with a little bit more tension, right? You can have all of the same similar pairings of like people you grew up with. I mean, definitely siblings, war buddies, so on, right? But the idea is that you guys are on the same team, you have the same goal, but the idea of losing to the other person drives you absolutely insane, right? This is super fun to role play. You get a lot of moments of tension. You do have to be careful though not to let the conflict overtake the story, but if anything can be turned into a competition, you're turning it into a competition. A good example of this is Gimli and Legolas, right? They're the quintessential rivals. They have warm feelings towards each other. They definitely have admiration, but they're doing drinking games. They're doing the counting of kills. But in the end, they're friends. They have positive feelings. So keep that in mind. Make sure you have friends as the front of the thing, but you definitely want to be the better of the two. You love duking it out. The third relationship type is romantic. And this takes many forms, right? Like you have people who are dating or married, you have budding relationships, you have unrequited love even. But try and pick a specific dynamic so that it's much easier to role play. Like you could be in the honeymoon phase where you're doing all of that cutesy back and forth talk, right? You could be like having a strong wife and the henpecked husband, so he's always listening to what she has to say. You could have the couple that's just been married, you know, for a really long time, so they just accept the other person exactly as they are, flaws and all. whatever it is, it's going to take a bunch of different forms, and it can manifest itself in a bunch of different ways. So like in combat, maybe you're more concerned about their safety, or if you guys have disagreeing ideas, instead of just outright saying it, you're going to kind of tiptoe around because you don't want to say that they're wrong. A thing to be aware of is try to keep it very mellow on the sexual tension. I don't know your table, maybe it's fine for you, but I think at most tables, it's not the vibe, and that's fine. You know, just try not to make people feel uncomfortable. A good example though of the romantic archetype is literally pick anything from any story. Every person has like a romance arc. Shrek and Fiona is a good example, which actually, now that I think about it, they might work for like every single one of these categories. The fourth relationship type is the guardian ward, and this is the classic parent-child dynamic, though it doesn't have to be familial. It's just anybody who feels like they are in charge of or responsible for someone else. So like, you know, a bodyguard feels responsible for the safety of a princess, or like a George and Lenny kind of situation. I think the most straightforward and fun way to play this is just to have, on one side, someone who is inept and keeps on getting into trouble or is trying to get into trouble, and on the other side you have someone who is just trying to stop that person from getting into trouble. Like, it's fun to play the stern dad or the protective mama bear, or on the other side to play like the rebellious teen or the approval-seeking child, right? But do keep in mind, if you're on the parent side, to not be overly controlling. You don't want to go too far in that direction. And then on the child side, try not to be so mischievous that you're like disrupting the group and stopping progress from happening. A good example of this would be The Incredibles, because you have the whole family dynamic. It's very straightforward. But if you want a non-familial example, The Emperor's New Groove, I feel like, is a perfect example, because you have Pacha and Kuzco, and Pacha feels responsible for Kuzco's safety, and Kuzco is completely inept and always getting into trouble. So I think that's like a perfect thing to model after if you're looking for that dynamic. The fifth relationship type is the master apprentice, and this is similar to the guardian ward, but with not much of a focus on responsibility and far more focusing on teaching a way of life. And, you know, like the classic examples of this are a knight and his squire, a wizard and his students, a master craftsman and his journeyman. Though when I play this, I think a far more fun way to play it is to have the master be someone who is like a con artist or is actually very unintelligent. So they have no idea what they're trying to teach, right? So it creates this very funny moment where the person who's the master gets to improv what is the way to do something completely wrong. And then the student has to then take that information and try it, apply it to successfully achieve their goals still. And they can't tell if they're messing up or why it's not working. They don't understand, they're just not good enough. And I think it makes for some very funny moments. On the other hand though, if you want to go for the more traditional route, you know, you got the classic examples of like Yoda and Luke, or like Mr. Miyagi and Daniel-san. But really the whole thing is just try and focus on the fact that you're just trying to teach a certain way of life, regardless of whether that way of life is to their benefit or not. The last relationship type is enemies, and this one is the hardest one to pull off because it's like the rivals but without any of the warmth. So like the old examples of this are like old competitors, people from feuding families, you know, someone who has been slighted in the past and they're holding on to a grudge. And the reason that this one is hard to pull off is because it can really break up the whole group dynamic if you are just always doing these characters that are just fighting without any warmth. So the goal should be to shift from being enemies to another relationship type, like turning into rivals, so you have some kind of admiration, or resolving and becoming old friends again, or maybe even having that romantic element of like, that's where the tension is. But you want to shift to those rather quickly, because sooner or later the group's going to be like, why are we traveling together if you guys hate each other so much? And another thing is, if you want to do this, try to do it subtly. Don't do it outright. Like, if you want to keep the tension without disrupting the group, you can do it with like backhanded compliments, or maybe like talking behind their back. Like little comments instead of just straight up being like, you're stupid, you're dumb, and I don't like you. That's going to lead to moments that I don't think are reconcilable story-wise. So keep that in mind, and if you do a big confrontation, try to do it with something in mind, and then use that to move you to another relationship. A classic example of this style is Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Jack Sparrow and Will, right? They're enemies, and then they slowly move to being rivals, where like there's some kind of admiration, but they definitely have a lot of tension and don't want to lose to the other person. So keep that in mind. It can be a lot of fun, but you know, tread carefully. So that's it. Those are all 6 relationship types, at least as far as I can think of. Please let me know if you think I left any out. Do keep in mind when you're doing this that you don't want to make people feel excluded. So try and make sure you're including other people in the dynamic that you're having instead of it just becoming a, you know, an in crowd and an out crowd kind of thing. If you're looking for more advice on D&D character building, you can check out this video right here. And please leave a like and subscribe. That stuff really helps me out. All right, that's all I got. See ya.